Hey everyone, Craig here, and today we're going to be carrying on with the configuration of our oVirt cluster. So if you cast your mind back to the last video, we did a full install of oVirt on a oVirt hypervisor node. We used Cockpit to do that, so all through the web interface. And now we're kind of left with this brilliant kind of empty blank canvas for us to work on. So out of the box, you get a data center and you get a cluster and you get some storage configured for your hosted engine. So this is a bit of a special data store, and the idea is that it's highly available purely for your hosted engine. So what we're going to do this video is we're going to get this cluster into, or this oVirt installation into a place where we can use it and we can start doing some meaningful things. So that means we're going to be hooking up some storage. If you cast your mind back, we hooked up FreeNAS. In FreeNAS, we hooked up some block storage. We're going to hook up some networks. We're going to configure some extra hosts and all that kind of stuff. So let's begin. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename the data center. So the data center, I've decided I want to follow kind of a bit of a Firefly theme. Now, I don't normally name my hosts or anything like that, but I thought it'd be interesting. So we're going to call this the verse. Anybody likes Firefly, you'll probably realize it's just the universe. So that's going to be our core data center, and this is where everything's going to live. We're going to stick with shared storage. We're going to put quotas onto audit for now. At some point in future, we're going to change that to enforced, but I'll cover that in a future video. Okay, so we've got the data center configured, and as far as clusters, we've got a default cluster. So I've actually ended up reconfiguring everything from scratch here. What I'd done in my first run through is I'd created a separate cluster, and what I'd done is tried to move the hosted engine across to it. That's easy enough. So the kind of method to do it isn't really documented, but what you can do is install your new hosts as being able to support the hosted engine, and then put the original host that's in the other cluster in maintenance mode, and everything kicks across, except for the storage. The storage doesn't migrate with it, so that's a little bit of a problem. It can be a bit painful, but it's the whole point of the hosted engine, and the way that that's all kind of put together is purely for reliability and resilience. You want to move it in an emergency, not as kind of normal kind of way of working. And so what I ended up doing in the other video was creating this extra cluster in the intention of deleting this default cluster. Actually, I think that was a bad idea. So this time around, I'm not going to delete it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename it. I'm going to call this, what did I call it? Serenity. Okay. And so we're going to be using all the defaults here. We don't want to use Gluster. We're not going to do anything with the networking, because I quite like that we're going to be using a Neutron as our networking provider there. CPU type, I'll leave that there for now. I need to check on my hosts what they actually support, what generation they are. In terms of optimization, I'm going to opt for server load. We're going to optimize our memory for server load here. And what that does is it means that we can overcommit by 150% of the server resources. I don't have massive servers, and given the number of VMs that I want to run, I'm more kind of interested in the quantity of things than overall performance in this particular case. And if memory starts becoming a problem, I can always throw some more in, but we'll use 150% overscheduling for now. I'm not going to disable multi-threading because I don't really care about that. And CPU threads, I'm going to say they count as cores. I know normally CPU threads and cores, they don't usually count because you don't get quite a full CPU thread. A full CPU core out of a thread, but it kind of represents how many different things that a machine can do at once. So again, in the interest of getting our resources to go a bit further, I'm going to enable that. I'm also going to enable memory ballooning, and this basically allows a bit of intelligent giving and taking of memory from within the guest. So with this enabled, you might see your guest memory fluctuating a bit. I'm not going to do too much with KSM. I'm just going to leave that as it is. To be honest, I don't really understand what it does, apart from being to do with pinning memory to CPUs in order to gain more effectiveness for performance purposes. So I'll leave that as it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Migration policy, we're going to opt for minimal downtime. We could do post copy and suspend workload if needed, but actually I don't want my workload to go down if it's being moved between hosts, so I'm going to stick with that. Resilience policy, we'll keep that as it is. We want to be able to migrate our VMs between hosts. Our scheduling policy here, now this is quite interesting because it allows you to start getting some quite nice kind of optimizations of your cluster. So for example, if you wanted to optimize for power saving, you could move all your VMs onto one or two hosts and have the power saving mechanisms turn off the other hosts. Again, I haven't really played with that on this. So I'd experimented with that on VMware, and it was actually a real nice feature. So maybe we'll take a look at that in future. But for right now, I think what we'll end up doing is let's go with evenly distributed. It looks like we can overcommit CPUs, and it looks like there's some sensible defaults there. So let's go for that. Scheduler wise, let's just leave that as it is, and additional properties. I don't really care about HA reservation, don't have any custom serials to provide. Console wise, I think we should enable VNC encryption. That feels like a reasonable thing to do. Again, I don't really know what the impact that is going to be on that, whether we're going to need to generate extra certs or anything like that, but let's enable it and find out. This is, if anything, a discovery session. Fencing, yeah, we'll enable that. That's always a good idea. I think we'll leave those as is. We may need to tune these depending on kind of how our cluster behaves. And the MAC address pool, we'll leave that as it is as well. We've got no reason to change it. Okay, so that's our cluster configured. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is add some hosts. So the way that we're going to add hosts is if I go into host and then new, and then we're going to add to Serenity. And the first host we're going to add is Orion. I think, no, not Orion. This is where I forget what my hosts are called. Oh, Haven, that's the one. So we're going to add haven.core.uk.eti.io. That's also the host name. So whoops. So we'll stick. Oh, I'm so used to using a Mac. Okay, there we go. Haven. We want it to activate after install. Do we? No, we don't. We want it to go into maintenance mode. So we'll leave that inactive for now. And I'll provide the password for it so that it can SSH in and do the initial configuration. Power management, I'm not going to enable that yet because I know that I need to do some tuning around it. The IPMI fencing agent doesn't seem to work too well with ILO 4, and I need to figure out why. So I'll come back to this. I'll probably do another video just configuring that. SPM, we'll leave that as it is. Console and GPU, we'll leave that as it is as well because we don't have any virtual GPUs. We're going to leave the networking provider alone because we want it to use the cluster default, which in this case is OVN. Kernel wise, let's set host dev pass-through and nested virtualization. So host dev pass-through is quite handy if you want to be doing things like passing a storage controller or passing a specific PCI device through to your guest. It does mean that your guest then gets pinned to a physical host, but that's not too bad. Same for SRIOV. If you want to start passing through virtual functions from your network devices, That's always good to have. And that actually the 10 gig cards that we've got do support SRIOV, so it'd be quite interesting to see if we can make use of that in future, and if there's any kind of performance benefits or penalties by doing that. Everything I've read suggests that SRIOV should be lower latency, a bit higher throughput, yada yada, because you're not virtualizing stuff. But yeah, we'll set that and see how we get on. So this is an important one, hosted engine. And this is asking us what we want to do with respect to deploying the hosted engine. And actually, I'm going to say I want to deploy it. And the reason being is you're going to want to have at least more than, well, you're going to have at least 2 hosts, maybe 3. I prefer 3 that can run your hosted engine. So in the event of a failure, your hosted engine, there's some HA agents that run on each of your hosts, and in the event of a failure it will say, all right guys, you know, who's running the hosted agent? Oh, silence, I better start it. And then providing it's got a connection back to the data store, it's then able to start the hosted engine, everything comes back, and it's hunky-dory. And actually it's quite a nice failover mechanism. I've failed things deliberately and accidentally a few times now, and it seems to work very well, and I haven't experienced any data loss. Granted, it's only really been, you know, small situations, but yeah, definitely recommend you have multiple hosts with that. Affinity labels, so at the moment everything's in a single rack, everything's on a single power supply, everything's on a single UPS and all that kind of stuff. So for now we'll leave the affinity labels as they are. We've got no reason to change that. And of course it's going to complain about power management, but I'm going to leave that as it is for now, so we'll hit OK. Now what this is going to do is, oh dear, it's going to complain. What did I do wrong? Okay, in the meantime let me check my DNS. I've probably done something wrong. Okay, so it turned out I've got to the bottom of it. It turned out I fat fingered an IP address. Oops. So if we go ahead now, and actually I just want to, I nearly told that to activate. Don't want it to activate because we need to configure networking. There we go. And so what this is going to now do is kick off an SSH connection in the background and pre-install a bunch of components and all that kind of stuff. So we'll let that do its thing, and I'll be back. I'm going to do the same again on Osiris, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, so while these 2 hosts are installing, what I'm going to do is just go over to networks, and we'll get the networks configured. So configuring a network here is really easy, and actually we've got a few to configure, so I'll show you one and then I'll go off and I'll do the rest. So first thing is first, let's configure our core network. So the core network's there just so that I can run, I can access any of the kind of back-end servers and what have you, or in case there's any kind of management tooling that we need to place on this network. We're going to call this is going to be management, and so for this network there's no VLAN tag. I'm going to set 9000 as the MTU because we're going to put this onto the 10 gig interfaces, and for the 10 gig interfaces we're going to need to make sure that all of our networks are configured with the jumbo frame MTU there, otherwise it won't take too well. We're going to go ahead here and set require all. We're going to want to disable that, otherwise it causes us some issues a little bit later. And as for the VNIC profile, well, I'm going to uncheck public here because any users who I give access to this platform, I don't want them to be able to provision on this network. So we'll go ahead and uncheck that. Now if I go ahead and hit OK, that'll have placed it in the verse. So let's go and do the others. Okay, so we got 2 special networks to configure here, our 2 storage VLANs. So I'm going to call these storage 150 and storage 151. So our first storage VLAN is 150, and we're going to want this to be storage 1, and our VLAN is going to be 150, and our MTU is 9000, and we're going So what we need to do here is uncheck this dialog here for VM network, because we don't want to provision any machines at all onto this network. It's purely to be behind the scenes for our iSCSI and other storage traffic. So I'll go ahead and create that, and we'll do the same again for storage 151. Again, the idea with this is to enable us to be able to do a bit of multi-pathing when it comes to our iSCSI traffic, partly for resilience, partly for throughput. So the other thing that we need to do on these storage networks as well is we need to uncheck require. If you don't uncheck require, then iSCSI complains that it's a required network or something. It's something I've run into in the past, and I've done that ever since, just because it always seems to work this way. We're not setting any QoS policies or anything like that on these networks yet. We really need to have a bit of a think about what it is we're going to apply and how we're going to apply it. For now, it's not going to be too big of a deal. We're not going to run into any issues. We certainly don't have enough traffic for it. So yeah, okay. So that's the networks, and if we go to our hosts, both of our new hosts have been configured here. Now I've deliberately left them in maintenance mode, and that's because I want to go ahead and configure networking. So if we go to the host and then we configure network interfaces, we can see that all of these networks are actually down, and that's absolutely well, at least they're showing these red down symbols, and that's absolutely fine because we haven't actually configured anything. So what I'm actually tempted to do with this is to bond these two 10 gig interfaces. Now ordinarily I wouldn't, because iSCSI and bonding is generally not a good idea. You don't get extra throughput or anything like that from it, but because we've got VM traffic on here as well, I'm wondering if it's worthwhile no, we're not going to bond them because I haven't set the switch up for it. That solves that one. So we're going to stick 150 storage on one, 151 on the other, and then where we've got these labels, actually the handy thing about labels is I'll just make that interface storage 2, that one storage 1, is you can drag whole batches of your networks across. So if I do this and actually put all of our tenants and kind of data networks on here on the first interface, and then put all of our management stuff on the second, that looks like it should be okay. Now the other thing that we need to configure here is on our storage is actually the IPs, else we're not going to be able to access the data stores. So this host is, so one of the reasons why I normally call things by a reasonable name, like a numbered name, is because then I can equate it straight to the IP, and it just means that I don't have to do any lookups. But in this case, I'm going to have to do a lookup. So Haven is 10.12. So this would be .12. And this is a /24 network, so we'll stick that in. There's no gateway because it's not a routed network. It's storage only. We don't want IPv6. We don't need to worry about any QoS. We don't have any custom properties to set, and we don't have any DNS configuration. So I'll go ahead and I'll repeat this for storage 2. This is 12, isn't it? There we go. Okay, so we've got our networking configured. So if we go ahead and apply that, what this will do now is the manager will go and connect off to the server, and it'll push the configuration down for us, and it'll do all of that nasty configuration that we probably don't want to mess around with. By configuring these VLANs and the networks as well, that's going to allow access to storage, means that these hosts will now be able to host the hosted engine. And we're going to do something special with, well, not special, but we're going to do something with the first host that we provisioned so that we can make sure that it's got the right networks. Because if you remember, we bootstrapped the 10 gig interfaces with some VLANs and IP addresses outside of this management interface. So we're going to want to bring that back in. So we'll go ahead and do that once these two hosts are set up. Okay, so they've applied now. If we go and go back to our host screen, and what we can do is we'll bring this, we'll just activate this host. Now, activating is the same as bringing it out of maintenance mode. What it's going to do is say that it's ready to receive VMs, it can be used, it's production, it's all good. And so it'll bring it back into the cluster, and it'll consider that as part of any kind of load balancing or vMotion type jobs that it's got. So this should just be complaining about power. Okay, good. Now I'm a little bit surprised we're not getting a little crown here. So if you look here, we've got a little gold crown for the hosted engine VM on Persephone. I expected Haven to have the same thing, because when we deployed this, we deployed it with the capability to run the hosted engine. So where can we have a look at that? So where will it tell us? Hosted engine HA not active. I think that'll probably come back up over time. We'll leave that be for now, and we'll go ahead and configure Osiris in the same way. Okay, so we've got both of our hosts now configured and kind of as we want them to be as far as the networking goes. And we can see now as well, we're getting this silver crown. And that means that this host here can run that hosted engine VM. So that's really good if we want to fail over any of the hosts, one of them goes away, or if we want to do any maintenance. And as it happens, we do want to do some maintenance. So we're going to take Persephone here, and we're going to move it into maintenance. And the reason why we're going to do that is configure network, because what we want to do is apply the same networking configuration to this host that we have to the others, because we don't really want it to be different. And so what we can see that is going on here, straight away we're getting a vMotion. So you can see that the hosted engine is leaving this machine and going over here, and our network is showing some utilization too. And that's quite good, because that sign is a good sign that our network is working correctly. So once this host this VM moves off this host, we'll go ahead and we'll do the same configuration. Okay, there we go. So our hosted engine virtual machine is now shifted across. So it's located here on Haven, and so you can see that the gold crown has been passed across. And now we've got two hosts here that are capable of running this thing. And our original host, Persephone, has a little error here that it's unavailable to run it due to the HA score. Now that HA score is probably because the host is in maintenance. But interestingly, that's our little note, configure network. That's why we put it in maintenance. Quite handy if you have a team and you kind of want to know why hosts go away or anything like that, or they get taken out of circulation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and configure the networking. Okay, so we've applied our networking configuration, but we have a little action item here telling us that our host needs to be reinstalled as important configuration changes are applied to it. So I think we'll take this opportunity here just to go and double check our kernel options, because we want to make sure we've got the same options as others, but we haven't. So I'm going to, these were all grayed out. So what I'm going to do is just hit reset there on our kernel boot parameters, and I'm just going to select host dev pass-through and nested virt like we have on the other boxes, and I'm just going to double check these other settings. So console's alright, affinity's alright, SPM's fine, and they're fine. Excellent. So SPM, by the way, is storage provisioning master or something like that, storage priority master or something like that, and basically the host that is the SPM is responsible for kind of all your leases and locks on the storage, so it decides who can do what, and it's kind of crucial if you don't want corruption. Okay, so we've applied our configuration. So now this Persephone host, we're going to have to do a reinstall. So that's dead easy to do. You just hit reinstall, and in this drop down you've got a reinstall option. So we'll go ahead and again just double check that. So hosted engine can sometimes trick you. We want to make sure that our hosted engine deployment action is deploy. I don't actually think this needs to be deploy if the hosted engine's already been deployed, but I'm going to set that just to be on the safe side, because I know that I do want to have the ability to run the hosted engine on this box. Okay, so while our host is installing, I'll tell you what, let's configure some storage. What we haven't done yet is configure any storage for our VMs to run from. So that's dead easy to configure. It's just a case of going to the storage tab, going to domains, and then we want to add a new storage domain. Ordinarily what you do is go in here, select your data center, select what function you want. You've got a few choices here, so maybe you've got somewhere you want to store your ISOs, that would be an NFS share. Maybe you've got somewhere that you want to export VMs to. I think that export domain storage thingamabobs are deprecated. I'm not totally sure on that, might want to read the docs. But we're going to be adding a new iSCSI data store. I'm going to call this UK FreeNAS Gold 01. And we've got some LUNs here already for us. In fact, let's add our bronze storage, because I added my gold storage in a previous video and I haven't cleared it up yet, so it's not. I can show you how to import a data store instead. So we're going to add a new one still, and we're going to add this bronze storage tier. So just as simple as click add. We've already logged into this target, so that's how the host already knows about it. And then click OK. And what's going to happen in the background is the storage gets mounted, and it puts some files on there just so that it knows that it's owned some kind of metadata-y type stuff, and that creates your data store. And this is now accessible to all of the hosts that are on the same network that are logged into that target, which is quite nice. Now, if you wanted to import a storage domain, so if you've got some storage that's already configured, maybe you want to disconnect it from one cluster and reconnect it to another, as I have in this case, it's just a case of going to import domain. And it's the same kind of process. So you go down, we're going to select an iSCSI storage type. We're going to call this UK FreeNAS Gold 01. And this time it wants us to try and discover things. So that's absolutely fine. We're going to connect to 192.168.250.2. We're going to enter some credentials here for our chat. That. And there we go. We've got a target here. So if we click it and then log in, and let's see what comes up. Okay, so it's found some storage. It's already got the metadata on there. That's how it has this storage ID, and it knows what it's called. So it's just had a quick look at those LUNs, and that's what it's found. So we're going to check on this. We're going to click that, and let's just have a quick look at the advanced parameters. Actually, activate domain in Datacenter. Yeah, we're gonna check that, because we do want it to be active. So now we've checked those boxes, we can go ahead and hit OK, and might be unrecoverable and destructive. And basically, if the storage domain is already attached to a data center, it might cause corruption if you've got two data centers that are active. Now that's absolutely fine, because I know that this is not mounted anywhere else. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. So that's quite handy if you're trying to recover things, if you had a new set of tin and you want to move stuff across. Maybe you've got an outage window planned or something like that. That's quite a nice way of being able to move your VMs across. Okay, so that's finished attaching our storage domain there, so we can see now that that's gone active. So that's great. So we've now got a fast pool of storage for our VMs, and we've got a slower pool for backups, snapshots, even kind of slower data we don't really care too much about in terms of performance. So that's really good. That's kind of handy. So something else I wanted to show you was to have a little look at this oVirt image repository. Now this is really quite cool, because it makes it quite easy to import ISOs and things like that. It saves you a step of having to download the ISO and then upload it again. And it's one of those things that you're going to have to do in order to actually make use of what you're using. So in my case here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this. I think I'm going to grab the CentOS In fact, no, I'll grab this small one. I'll grab Fedora 30 cloud base image. So if we click on this and then hit import, and then it's going to give us some choices, and basically it wants to know where to download the image to, because what it's going to do is download this image from a central catalog and put it where we say. So we're going to say put it in bronze and leave it on the default quota. I'll cover quotas a bit later, probably in another video. And then I'm going to tell it to import as a template. So we're going to import this as the Fedora 30 cloud base v1.2. Okay, so that's now downloading for us. It said that we can check it in events. So we can see here under tasks, this quite handy little button here. It gives us a kind of overview of what's going on in terms of tasks in your cluster. So we can see that here it's installing Persephone for us, and in the meantime it's also doing this download of the image. So we'll let that happen and then we'll come back once this is finished. Okay, so our image is downloaded and it's now created created a template here. So we should be able to take this and deploy something. So let's try. So if we hit new VM in the corner of this template, it'll ask us where we want to deploy it, which cluster. It'll ask us what template to use. So we're going to use the Fedora 30 cloud base that we've just deployed. We're going to tell this that it is Fedora 30. I'm a little bit surprised that that didn't get auto completed, but it's not the end of the world. I'll leave it at other OS because I can't seem to see Fedora. Instance type, we'll call this a medium. I don't think we've got any predefined size in categories set, so that's okay. It's going to be a server. Quota can be default. I'm going to call this test VM 01 because I like to be boring. Okay, and we don't need to worry about any of these. We've got an image. We're going to put it on the lab network. And console one, that's fine. And the one thing that we are going to do, we're going to want to configure some credentials. So on the initial run, we're going to use, so all I did there was hit advanced options in the corner. And so what I'm going to do is just set cloud init sysprep, and I want to set a username. We'll call it hello, and we'll create a new password of hello as well. Why not? And that should go ahead and create that for us. Excellent. Let's go ahead and create it and see what happens. Okay, so that was a bit weird. It looks like the Fedora 30 template, the image that I got hold of, doesn't work correctly because I've ended up with two VMs here that are kind of stuck in a image lock state, although they failed to deploy. So we can see that if we go here and then go to events, you can see that it failed to complete the creation. I'm not sure why that is. I'm also not too sure how I'm going to be able to clear them up because there doesn't seem to be a way to remove them while they're stuck in this state. I've just had a little look and it seems that restarting the oVirt engine will do the trick. So we'll bring this V up and then we'll have a little VM up and we'll have a little look at that. So if I hit run on this, this should start it for us. And because we've used cloud init as our configuration choice, it should create a user for us too. So if we go into the console, well, I don't have that set. So let's go to console thingies, options, and then select no VNC and OK, and then console. There we go. I haven't got the CA cert installed. Okay, Firefox is so much easier. That just worked. Okay, so we just created a user, didn't we? What? I can't remember what user we created now. So if we go back to, I want to show advanced options and initial run, authentication. Our user is called test. And helps if I remember it. There we go. Yeah, and we've got network. Excellent. So we can see here that we've been able to deploy a template, get a VM running, get the kind of credentials and all that kind of stuff added for us. And yeah, we've got something that works. We can now use it to deploy VMs. Excellent. Okay, well, thanks very much for watching. Hopefully this has been useful, informative, all that kind of good jazz. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do the YouTubey stuff. If you didn't, leave me a comment, let me know. Thanks very much. Have a great day. Bye bye.